Thank you so much. Truly a pleasure to be here on this extremely important topics on how we can long term gather effective support for Ukraine and at the same time also have the long term perspective of development in Russia. And that's also, of course, leads to the issue of sanctions, circumventions of sanctions, and how we can implement sanctions and our different measures to make sure that they are effective. These are for sure not easy things to work on, as we all. I haven't been participating, but I heard some whispers here prior to come in here that this has been very interesting discussions on this topic during this day. It is extraordinarily clear from the Swedish government side that the steadfast support of Ukraine will and must be one of our absolutely top priorities. Not only for the future of Ukraine, but of course for the stability of the whole region and our security in long term. And we will do whatever possible to have a continuous, very strong pressure on Russia to reduce Russia's economic capacity. And in this regard, sanction is, of course, a primary tool. We have consequently, throughout past years, called on additional sanctions towards Russia since the full-scale invasion in 2022. And it's also clear that it has been the most comprehensive economic decoupling of EU from a third country in modern days. And I don't think we really understand the huge efforts that has been taken throughout Europe to actually achieve this decoupling. Spoke to some of my German friends and how very difficult and what a massive political, economical, and just to implement how they changed their whole supply chains of natural gas, for instance, and managed to put measures in place in very short time. So I do believe that this has been very important for the future of Europe. And all the things that has been done has, of course, cut out Russia of very important markets. And long term, we all know that Russian economy is hurting. I think it's we must not underestimate, and this is of course unfortunate for the Russian people, that they have been under Putin's leadership been thrown back at least 30 years in economic development. Any country would need innovation and prosperous industries to be relevant in the future with all the challenges that lies ahead. And Mr. Putin has sort of taken those tools out of his own hands by his policies throughout the last decade. And now with the full impact of the war in Ukraine, he's sort of really pushing that agenda very efficiently towards his own people. However, we know that it doesn't hinder him from continuous his own ambitions. So even though there are, in somewhat from an economic perspective, maybe seemingly so that the Russian economy is sort of surviving this, long term, it's not. And I think that we also must keep that in mind for the future on how Russian economy will develop and their capacities and so on. Not least looking into security for the future. Now we have a full-scale war in Ukraine. It will go on for quite some time, but next step of that and how that will affect our European security will be crucial. It's also clear that the EU must work very, very coherent and on comprehensive measures towards the Russian economy to increase the pressure to have the money flow cut truly. And this is, as we know, and which been discussed here, not always easy. So therefore, of course, the importance of further sanctions packages are very, very important. During our presidency of the European Union, we prioritize of putting more efficient implementations of the sanctions and also address the issue of circumvention. 2 sanctions packages with focus on preventing circumventions were adopted during our presidency. And sanctions compliance is, of course, one of the important topics in this regard, and requires joint efforts by member states governments, national authorities, European Commission, EAS, international partners, and not least the G7. And this is also something that our foreign minister and also my minister, Mr. Johan Forssell, have been discussing at many of the meetings in the European Union. I should also say, when I now just over a week ago attended the formal trade ministers meeting, circumventions of sanctions is very high on the European agenda, and there is a strong will to really work on these issues to have the sanctions being effective, but also including analyzing the effects of the current sanctions and how we can sort of make them sharper for the future. In Sweden, this is also one of the topics, and I understand you have discussed this also earlier today. And the relevant government authorities from security police, customs, etc., really have a very important task in working on these issues. And we are in constant dialogue with them to urge our government agencies, of course, to step up in this regard. This is also, I would say, among many other important challenges for our government agencies, a top priority. And of course, we expect every company operator to comply with Swedish law. That is just a foundation of how we expect things to work. However, we can, and we do fully understand that this is not always the easiest way to track down where your products are going after export. And therefore, I think it's also very important to look into, which has been also on the agenda, how do we address the issues of documentations in regards of goods that are being moved cross borders. We would also, of course, like to see that we, on a EU perspective, that we work so much in the same way, and that we can share information in a good way to have our government agencies throughout the member states to be effective. And really the importance of information sharing in this regard will also always be crucial. The work on the directive on criminalizing breaches of sanctions across EU member states continues, and we really prioritize this during our presidency, and it will also be an important part to be able to target sanctions, circumventions through judicial measures that are harmonized within the EU's. Final steps are yet to be concluded in this regard. It's already a criminal offense to breach sanctions in Sweden, but it might to impose the stricter requirements in this regard. We also need to see some probable adjustments. So we have a special rapporteur looking into this who will report in June 2024 on further measures in this regard from a Swedish perspective. Weakening the Russian economy is, of course, one very, very important task for us to reduce their capacity of acting and fulfilling their ambitions in this war in Ukraine. But maybe even more important long term, not only long term, but from now and further on, is also to strengthen the economy of Ukraine. And of course, we have seen extremely ambitious military packages. We're very proud to see that Sweden has really delivered in this regard. But it's also clear that a long-term continuous future for Ukraine is to have a fully functioning economy. And we were standing here, I believe it was a half year ago, when we had Minister of Finance from Ukraine here, and how he described how Ukraine managed to have coming back on a positive GDP during a full-scale war, and that is truly impressive. And we should support that development, absolutely. So parts of this is, of course, to facilitate the Ukrainian grain exports, and we have really been engaged in this regard, financing procurement and export of Ukrainian grains through the World Food Programme. And we recently had a support package amounting to 100 million SEK, which was announced during the Food Security Summit in Ukraine. And of course, the EU's support in this regard of actually having the grain export flowing is crucial. And we are also extraordinarily happy to see that the European Commission's recommendations to open accessions negotiations with Ukraine. It's truly a milestone. And I must say, listening to other politicians in Europe, this is a huge shift in European policies for many member states. And we should really cherish this moment and opportunity in moving forward as fast as strong as we can in this very, very important process. The Swedish support throughout the years on the bilateral level has been especially within reform capacity. It has been a focus for decades and it will continue to be important. And of course, we're very proud to have the largest bilateral strategy ever for a country heading for Ukraine now, amounting to 6 billion SEK up till 2027. And this is in truth a very, very strong commitment from the Swedish government. But then also coming back to the trade issue, how to build up the economy of Ukraine. And when I meet Swedish businesses, we always talk about the importance of placing orders with suppliers of Ukraine. That's a first step to really start the economy revival itself. And the next step, we will also see how we can have more Swedish companies operating in Ukraine. Of course, it's during wartime, so it's not easy, and it requires many special instruments. But we're very, very happy to see that many Swedish companies are really wanting to engage in the support of Ukraine, and we know that there are a lot of businessmen really engaging in this process. We will, as which was presented in the budget, we have now a 333 million SEK that are set aside to be part of the export guarantee program. This will come into force early next year. And that really takes away a little bit of the risk that lies within doing business with a country at war. And all this is based on international rules and regulations where we clearly need to develop new tools to be able to operate in a landscape like this to support Ukraine and support Swedish companies who want to be present in Ukraine. We have started the Business Sweden operations in Ukraine, and an office will be open, and more people from Business Sweden will be allocated to Kiev. And I think that is also an important milestone in getting to know the market, which are the players, how to operate in Ukraine, and at the same time addressing the very difficult issues that might occur when we talk about insurances and etc. etc. So that will be a good add-on to the Swedish support for Ukraine. Then last but not least, it's of course for Swedish companies who want to engage. We're extremely happy with that, but we also see that there are this is not only good for the Swedish companies, it's good for the Ukraine long-term economy, and it will actually increase the European whole value package of adding another huge market to the European Union internal market, which is one of the key foundations of the wealth and growth of Europe. So to have Ukraine joining in this regard will bring us economic growth to all of us. And at the same time, we are of course continuously concerned about the way the Russians are operating in so many different ways. Everything from being very active in different election campaigns on the globe, and how they actively try to circumvent all the measures that the West puts in place. But unless we do this, and unless we do it properly, the Russian issue and this strategic threat toward our common future will continue. So we really must work together with Ukraine and all the member states of EU to be long-term successful in this regard. I just came from a meeting of Swedish defense companies discussing future for Swedish defense industry, and they are doing quite well. But I'm very happy that I got to sit down with Tommy Gustafsson Rask, the CEO of BAE Systems Hägglunds, and when he met his Ukrainian friends and also Mr. Zelensky, it's a very, very clear thing that Sweden produces military equipment of the highest quality, which actually saves lives in Ukraine. And for that, I think we all should be extremely proud. Thank you so much.